aka the Mrs., aka Auntie Ronnie, honey. I know it's been a while, but it's time for us to jump back in, talk to the people, see what's going on in the community. Now, I have a fantastic guest today. I hope that you are going to enjoy the conversation for the next few minutes because, honey, when you get to be around stardom, it is exciting. So, I'm going to let Mr. Brandon Nicholas go ahead, introduce himself, talk a little bit about what he's doing, what's going on in the community, what's happening, who he is, how you need to be looking for him. All right, go ahead, Brandon. Tell the people who you are and what you got going on, baby.
That is the most loving, warm, flattering opening I've heard in a while. Thank you for that. I am Brandon Nicholas. I go by Brandon Nick. I am a storyteller, podcaster, photographer. Honestly, it's like I like to say that I push my agenda of Black queer liberation and pleasure through whatever medium and modality fits the moment. So I oftentimes do dibble and dabble in a lot of things, but I lead with I am a photographer, filmmaker, and producer.
Fantastic. Now, let me tell you something, honey. When you have all of that going on, oh my goodness gracious, that means you have that creative spirit. It is in the very root of who you are as a human being. So, can you tell us a little bit, like, what encouraged you? What got you started out here in the world, making room for our community?
Yeah. So I would say the origin of where I am now started when I met my partner, now my husband, Donnie, our love, and we, at the time, this might have been 2013, 2014. We both were just really frustrated with the lack of representation of Black gay men in media. There weren't that many TV shows doing good representation or any representation, honestly, around then. So we were like, we'll take matters into our own hands. I had a back by that point. I had a background in photography and videography. My husband is a playwright, so we were like, we're just gonna do our own thing. We're gonna do our own thing. So we did a Kickstarter, a successful Kickstarter, and we made our first web series, Modern Day Blaque. And literally since then, we had just kept the ball rolling. It was like, all right, we did this project now. We want to tell more stories about Black gay men, and that had inherently and beautifully and naturally evolved into we just want to tell stories about the Black queer and trans experience, and just create work and create spaces that fosters community, both online and offline. Because we have an annual picnic that we do every year during Pride. It's called the Black Queer and Here Picnic. Because candidly, we love Pride Month. The Pride Parade is very fab, but it is not oftentimes catered towards us. So we were having a Black Queer and Here picnic as a way to just really anchor the Black queer and trans community. So yeah, like so much of the work we that I do now was really born from not feeling reflected or represented in the mainstream media. And since then, I have personally and maybe even politically just like divorced myself from like wanting that expectation. I don't anticipate. Seeing really nuanced, full fledged Black queer stories in mainstream media. And I know they do exist, and I'm thankful for them, for the stories and for the storytellers that we have within the industry that are making wonderful work and are advocating on behalf of Black queer and trans folks. But even with that, I am still very much rooted in. I look for representation in the communities of artists that I know. Like I'm thankful to be connected to so many independent Black queer and trans storytellers, filmmakers, artists, podcasts, folks of different mediums. So that's where I get my representation and reflection from. I've divorced myself from expecting the industry, trademark the industry, to give me and our communities the representation we need when we actually have the tools. Not always the resources, but we have the tools, the audacity, and the nerve to make it ourselves.
Oh my gosh, that is so fantastic. That's really what Blackout Magazine is all about. So, I mean, like this is perfect, right? And so you talk a lot about this community of creatives and being able to make space for them. Can you talk, and you alluded to a little bit about that idea of we have the ideas, we have the drive, we have the passion, but not always the finances, right? And so how do you personally, you and your husband, or those that you work with, how do you all address that? Is it something on a collective? Do you all, look for grant writing? So, like, how do you all
Yeah,
over?
you know, that is honestly like the $1 million question, and I am still looking for the answer. Look, the $1 million question, because honestly, $1 million would change a lot of our lives, right? Folks are always like, "What would you do with $1 million?" And my first answer is always, "I would give it back to the community. I would start I forgot, I can't think of the name right now, but I would start an incubator for Black and trans folks to tell stories." Um, but yeah, I don't have an answer for that, and I think that is oftentimes like a frustrating struggle. But I do think, and I hate that this is such a strength, because I would love for us as artists to not have to create from a deficit. But I do think part of the power and the beauty that we hold as Black LGBTQ folks is that we can turn nothing into something. We can literally take air and make an award-winning project. We can take the $20 we got left in our bank account, right? And
Yes.
barter and rely on community and skill trades, and oftentimes for me, I'll say personally, is like because I am a believer in paying people, especially when I have the funds. But and the Capricorn in me is just like, I want folks to be paid. I do believe we should all be paid for our work. But not always having that money, because communities oftentimes, especially creatives, are all kind of just passing around the same $50 bill. I will oftentimes just wear multiple hats at once. So, like, as I said earlier, I do a lot of things. I just recently wrapped up a podcast called Film Festival Friends, where I interview other filmmakers that I met during the film festival circuit. And that was pretty much branding wearing 10 hats. I'm hosting, I'm editing, I'm producing, I'm doing all of these things. So oftentimes, like, we are, and I do think that is actually a skill, right? Because it's like, um, other folks, and I won't necessarily put this on races, because I do know that there are Black queer creatives who aren't creating from a deficit, which I think is beautiful. But some folks actually have teams, well-rounded teams, like staff and paid teams that can do things. And there are some folks who will still be like, "Hey, the missus, I have this thing going on. I can't pay you, but I believe in the project, and if you believe in the project, let's make this work." And that is also great. And then some people are just like, you know, I feel wrong. It feels like an injustice for me living in this capitalist world to ask you for free labor. So
Right.
I'll just do it myself. So all that to say, like, finding the money is always a challenge, because there aren't that many grants or fellowships that are like specifically catered to Black queer and trans folks. And for the ones that are, as you can imagine, we are all trying to like vie and apply for this same grant, which is beautiful when, like, somebody I know gets it, because it's like, I am celebrating your win because I know the work that you make is great. And I also am a firm believer that, like, I'm not in competition with anyone. Like, we are all in community together. Like, the work that I make is not the work that you make. It's not the work that the next person makes. But we are all like chopping at this proverbial tree of telling Black queer and trans stories. Hopefully, with intention and integrity. So all that to say, the money hunt is always a process.
Yes,
And
always
look,
trying to get the bag, right? Always trying to get the bag.
literally, because I'm waiting to hear back from grants now. I'm like having strategy meetings on, all right, if I don't get these grants, if I don't get these fellowships, how do I make the work that I want to make? I am in development for a my first feature documentary right now. It is called Dirty. I'm really excited about that. I am also turning a short film that I made, Miss Honey the Catsuit, into a docu series. So I'm also excited about that. But all of these things, and I'm a person who with lofty ambitions. Like, I am not just I mean, and it's no shade to anybody else, but this I like to make things, and I'm just like, I want to shoot for the stars, even when I don't have
Yes.
star, even when I can't afford the spaceship to get me there. Baby, I'm still shooting for the stars. So it's like, how do I make these projects um, with whatever resources that I have,
Hmm.
while hopefully not compromising the integrity of the actual project.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Let me just apologize. to you and our audience, because if you heard my dog sneezing, that's what happens when you're not in a real studio.
Look, I got two cats in here right now, and one of them, thankfully, both of them are chilling, so I get
Oh
it.
my gosh. But I really do love what you shared, especially about that being in competition.
Mm.
I think that's such a beautiful thing. That really, that is what community is about.
I
And,
mean, and honestly, if I can jump in really quick, that
yeah,
was a beautiful lesson to learn over the like 10 plus years that I've been making the work. Because I do think some of this is maybe not intentionally, but some of this is really informed by like the scarcity of resources that there are. Right? It's just like younger Brandon when I was making stuff, and being in social circles with folks, and I'm saying social circles now because it's like I don't think I'd arrived at like community as a practice by that point, but it's like, oh, this person is launching this project, and I'm over here like navigating imposter syndrome and some level of like FOMO, and like why not me? Like I'm happy for you because I also love the work that you're doing, but I'm like internally navigating some level of like, well, damn, why them and not us? Because we're doing the work, and at some point I realized that that's not helpful, and it's also like, again, the work that you're making is not the work they were making, and it's not even like a apples to oranges thing. It's just like we are inherently telling very different stories. Like we could we could tell the same tired DL narrative about like some DL man, just using that as a easy low hanging fruit example, but we could still tell it differently, right? So at some point I was just like, oh, I'm not in competition with like this organization or like these grassroots organizers. And I think once I arrived at like we're not competing, like, and if we are competing, it's not our fault. It's literally because the systems that have the resources aren't giving them out enough. So it's just like once I had that realization, it freed up so much space in me to actually be able to celebrate like all of the work that is happening, regardless of the quality, regardless of like how similar or dissimilar we are. I think learning that like I'm not in competition, I'm in community was probably one of the best things that could have happened to my artistic career because it also just like helped reframe and reshape like the type of work that I make, knowing that like we are all in this pool, us as black, queer, and trans folks, regardless of age and background and income and all of these other factors, we are all in this pool of we live in this floating rock in the middle of nowhere that like a lot where a lot of these things don't matter, but a lot of these things do matter.
yeah,
And at the end of, and having that thought is just like I just want to love and celebrate my community through my work as best as I can, and and be supportive of other folks as well as to the best of my resources and capacity. So yeah,
yeah.
thank you for pointing that out.
Absolutely. That, I mean, it really is one of those things, and I think it's so important, right? That those that are coming behind us hear that
Mm,
message as well,
yeah.
because it only strengthens us, right?
Yes.
Um, it is a sad thing that we as people have to know how to make something out of nothing, but it also speaks to who we are, that we can make something out of nothing.
Yes.
So I think that's a wonderful thing. And so, um, like, as a young person, like, we're talking about those that are coming behind us. So, like, when you were a kid, were you like, I mean, I'm gonna age myself here, but I don't think you were probably running around with a video camera. You might have been running around with a phone. I don't know. But like, did you know when you were, in the sixth grade, hearing a story, right? That like, I want to do that. Like, what was the moment that hit the spark? Like,
Yeah.
come from a family of filmmakers. Like, what was it that
I
said,
wish it was that. That would be such a beautiful. I mean, no, but like, and what's so funny is you said sixth grade, and I'm like, sixth grade. I definitely just knew I was going to be a backup dancer for like Janet Jackson. Like sixth grade, it was very much like I'm going to be in the music videos. I want to dance for this person and that. Like I just knew I was going to dance for Missy Elliott and Britney Spears and Janet Jackson. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. And then dancing, slowly and became a dream. I think prior to I think what got me on this path of like wanting to do filmmaking was I went to Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, I originally went for journalism because my family was just always like, "Oh my gosh, Brandon, you got the personality. You need to be on TV. We need to see you on TV, baby." Blah 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 blah. And I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure. You like it, I love it."
Yes.
And then so I went to Morgan State for broadcast journalism. Was working at a local news station while I was in school, and I had quickly realized, I think within my first month of working at that news station, I was like, I don't want to work in news. Like, you know, I'm from Annapolis, Maryland, but I lived in Baltimore for school. So it was like, you know, Baltimore is not the greatest city in the world, despite I actually think it was a tag at some point, like Baltimore, the greatest city in the world. But we know, like we know, you know, folks seeing The Wire and all these other like cliche things. Baltimore has its issues like every other city. That said, there was a lot of beautiful things, and still are a lot of beautiful things that were happening in Baltimore. And I was so confused. Young me was just so confused because I'm just like, why is everything about like cars being stolen and murders and robberies and all this bad black news and all this just bad news? Like Baltimore, like yes, this is part of the Baltimore that I live in, but this isn't Baltimore. And you know, so it was just like, oh, there are like politics to the
Mhm.
news. And I remember talking to one of my professors, Eric Dodson, who was a mentor of mine at the time, and I was just like, yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking about changing my major. Mind you, this is second semester sophomore year or first semester junior year, which is to say, changing my major would have definitely set me back. And he was like, no, 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 don't do that. But like, and he essentially put me on a track to be a documentary filmmaker, and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense because I can actually still be a journalist and tell the stories that like I care about, and do them on my terms. So like I just use my free electives to learn as much as I can about video production because at the time Morgan didn't have a film like a film course. Like they have since exploded and expanded now, and now they have all the programs, which is great for the new kids. But when
Yeah.
I was at Morgan, look again talking about being younger. When I was at Morgan, we didn't have that. But yeah, it was
Yes.
like I originally wanted to be a journalist, broadcast journalist, but then I realized I didn't want to be on TV, and then two, I just didn't want to work for news. So I was like,
Mhm.
I'll just do documentaries, and then again, I met my partner, and I think that just got me put on the path of like, yeah, I just want to do black queer stuff because like
Yeah.
that is really what gives me the wow sensation. That's what lights my heart on fire.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, that is so cute. I love that. That's just adorable because that's the thing, right? So, um, oftentimes, my spouse and I, when we talk to couples, that's one of those things, right? So, if you have a thing in you,
yeah,
that person has a thing in them, and then that should sort of feed off of each other. Doesn't mean you're doing the same thing. It doesn't mean that, but those two things, when they get together, it should just explode. And
mm-hmm,
for you all, that's what it's done. Now, it's funny that you mentioned The Wire and Baltimore. So, I am a good old country girl from North Carolina. And, honey, when I watched The Wire, I mean, I was running around like I can identify corner boys. You just don't know. Yeah. So, just I'll admit it.
yeah,
And my spouse who's from Chicago is like, girl, sit down. Because I was like, I got it. I know what's happening in these streets. And yeah,
right,
you don't know. But nonetheless, I thought I did. Um, so talking about your relationship and how you all have this opportunity, right, to feed into each other because you're out here, you're doing all of the things. And it's not easy, right? You want to tell the stories and you want to give perspective and representation, and because both of you are in that
yeah.
area, so like at home, how do you all sort of take the weight of the world off, right? So like
Mm,
you are trying to represent a community and do all of those things. So like when you're at home and you can lay that down for a little bit, like how do you all pour into each other? What does that look like to keep each other going, right? To
mm,
get up the next day and make that
mm.
something out of nothing. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that.
Wow. That is a great question. That like again, I don't know how we do it. And look, there goes my cat scratching at the door. Um, it's like I'm going to find the answer, but I will start with I don't know how we do it, but I just know that we do it. And I do think part of what makes it part of what has made it more challenging is the fact that we both now work from home, right? You know, because of COVID and the quarantine, a lot of the ways that we show up in the world have shifted. So we both are very much homebodies, which is to say, before the panini and the lockdown, it was so much easier to come home and take all of the day off of us. But when the day is happening inside the house, it's like, how do we decompress? Um, and then again, just working from home, it's just like, how do we also manage space and
Mhm.
still liking each other, which is, you know, such a
Yes.
strong task. Because I do remember hearing that, like, during quarantine, that like folks are breaking up and getting divorced because they realized that we can't be around each other like this. They don't like each other as much as they do. So I'm also saying that I'm very thankful that Danya and I have such a beautiful, strong foundation. We're like, you know, we can be like, you know, we need some space.
Hmm.
We're like, you know, communication and comprehension are both very valued in our relationship. I mean, and it is a thing of like, because we both are doing very deeply rooted community work. Like all of the work, all of the like arts that I make is for community. My partner, he actually runs a nonprofit called Write It Out that teaches playwriting and wellness training for people living with HIV, and he's been doing that independently for the most part for like 6 or 7 years. So it's like, you know, our work is like at the DNA and the bone marrow of everything that we do. It is community centered. So of course, like when community is navigating some foolishness, you know, insert anti-trans bill here, or like lack of HIV funding there, or you know, violence here, violence there. Like it does really impact us deeply. Um, and we, again, I think we are very fairly open, or try to be. You know, I'll say try to be because I'm not always the most transparent person. I think that's probably the Capricorn in me, but we do create a lot of space for one another. To be and to feel and to process. And I think what also helps us as a couple and just like me in general is like I am a big proponent, and I think this really goes into like my ethos of community, which is
Hmm.
like we're all on the same team. You know, shit will. I hope I can cuss, but like shit will happen. Things will get rough. Things will get really raggedy. You know, egos get in the way. Pride gets in the way. We navigate depression and all these other things. We live in a world that does not care about us, right? Which is to say, our feelings. You know, like sometimes I will close up and clam up, and I know that's not the most warm or forthcoming thing. Even like in this relationship and outside of this relationship. But what is also always a helpful reminder is that we're on the same team. So
Hmm.
even when I'm not feeling my best and I might snap, or like I might come off, like there might be some friction, or I might say something or do something that makes you feel away, um, know that like I still love you and we are all on the same team. I do not want you to lose. I'm not trying to hurt you. I just, you know, my body and my mind are still is still learning how to healthily express um, hardship. And again, we are on, and it's the same thing creatively. You know, too many. How does the saying go? Too many cooks in the kitchen, and
Yes.
we need to be reminded. Hey, because I'm good for ending a meeting with, I just want to remind everybody we are on the same team. I want us all to win.
Yes.
Because I also will come in with strong opinions. I think I'm good at seeing gap, and I don't know if this is the Capricorn or the neurodivergence, but I'm good at seeing gaps in things. It's like, hey, I just want to call this out, and I might, you know, and I might create a conversation. But at the end of the day,
Yes.
we're all on the same team. So
Yes.
I think all of that, bringing it back to your original question, I think it is still very much a something we are learning in real time. Because like, and Danye, my husband, he is good at saying this. You know, like we unfortunately, us as like younger folks, we don't, and us as like young black gay men, right? Queer men, we don't have the luxury or privilege to have a lot of possibility models. So like a lot of us and like my social circles and like my community, right? We are very much figuring this out all in real time. We're building our planes as we're flying them. We're building the train and the tracks as we're flying, as we're driving them, because we don't have like, most of us don't have that many like reachable role models, and if we do, it's probably like, you know, more intimate. Like I know my, you know, like
Hmm.
my uncle and his roommate, or you know, something like that.
Hmm.
Like a lot of us don't, like for a lot of us, which is so interesting because I don't know if you're on Twitter or X, but like, you know, there's often conversations around, you know, like representation and, you know, the need for black on black love, because we're oftentimes not seeing these things, and in some ways we are becoming these for the next generation.
Yeah.
um I don't know how I got there. Like I said, I can talk, but
No, no, no. I love it. Like that's the thing, right? That's what happens is, to be honest, there's so much packed into every part of everything that we do.
mm-hmm.
So, I think it's a wonderful thing that you have these expansive responses, to be honest.
Thank
Like,
you.
but it's because there are layers to this thing that we call life, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one impacts the other, and so, it is precious jewels that we are able to share with others. And so, no, it is wonderful that to talk about that. And I will say that for Winston and I, that is one of the most significant things for us. Couples relationships,
Mm-hmm.
representation of Black on Black love
Yeah.
within the full alphabet community. Okay, like the alphabet mafia, honey, we gonna
Yes.
tell you, right? And that's really important to us because um, that experience, of your humanity and how that shows up in loving one another. And it's so funny that you would say, your uncle and his roommate, because sure enough, okay, sure enough, I remember that, Auntie May and her good friend.
And her
Okay,
best friend.
my best friend. Okay, best friend. But y'all only got one bed in the house. Okay, who best friend? Okay,
Yes.
yes, I love that. I love it. Fantastic. Um, so talking about that, right? That those steps of those things, and that we are leaving space for those that are coming behind us. Who would you say is your greatest inspiration? Like,
Mm.
when you think about man, I don't want to necessarily be like them, but I do know that having seen their journey or seen the results of their journey, it encourages me that I can continue to do the work.
Mm. My front of brain thought was Kiki Palmer because I'm just like Kiki does a lot of things so well, like right, and
Mhm.
like she, and, as far as we know, because I don't know her personally, but she just also is such a like lovable, likable person. Like it feels like she leads with kindness, which is something that I really resonate with. Like I have a tattoo on my body that says "Be kind." I try my best to lead with kindness, um, but she also is like somebody who feels like she is not bound by a medium. Like she has the podcast, she acts, she sings, she does. It's like what can't Kiki do, right? And
Right.
in a lot of ways, it's like, well, I don't think it's like what can't Brandon do, but it's just like for me, it is like I have a message, I have I have an idea, I have an offering to give to community. What shape does that take? So I
Mhm.
think in some ways, front of brain, I think it is like Kiki Palmer, in a sense of like, oh well, this person can do all the things, and nobody bats an eye or says like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing? And for the most part, they consume the audience, our community consumes it all. So it's like, yeah, I'd like to be like a Kiki Palmer. Granted, I don't, and this is something I'm grappling with personally now. It's like I don't want to be so front facing with the work because I'm very much like I just want to do the work and like give it to people. I'm very much behind the scenes, but I do
Mhm.
know a lot of the work that I have been building recently and the work that I'm presently building does require Brandon to be to be a bit more like camera ready. So like leaning into my baby, this is Kiki Palmer energy. And I also and this doesn't answer that question, but I also just want to like speak Ryan Coogler into the room because what I think is nice about him for me is that like um, it is really affirming for me as a person who is neurodivergent. It is oftentimes thinking and talking at very different speeds to hear Ryan Coogler accept awards and to just speak, do these interviews, and he's not always the most articulate, and that gives me. I mean, we still understand what he says, and I hope throughout this interview, folks understand what I'm saying. But it's like
Absolutely.
Ryan Coogler for me has somewhat of a speech impediment. I have a speech impediment. So I think seeing somebody as successful and celebrated as him, also not like needing to shift or morph himself to like fit the white gaze, and just like to be himself, also like really resonates with me. Every time I see that man talk, I'm just like, yeah, Brandon, like you can get on a stage and like just talk. The words
Yeah.
will come out. Slow down, of course, but but the words will come out. So for me, like celebrity wise, roadmap wise, I would say it's Kiki Palmer. But most of my inspiration really does come from community. Like just seeing what is possible with little to nothing, or even what is possible when you actually have a lot, right? I'm fortunate enough to live in New York City, where we are densely populated with so many Black, queer, and trans folks, folks that I know and folks that I don't know. So I believe that like seeing so many expressions and possibilities really helps me imagine like new ways of thinking. This is like, oh, I can do a podcast because I heard so and so do a podcast. It's like, oh, I can actually approach this documentary this way because I've seen what like Erica Jordan, Black trans filmmaker. I've seen like what she's done with her work, and so things like that. It's just like community is for me. It's always like it always comes back to community.
Yes, it's definitely giving life, right? I think that's what really happens is, as we see those things, and as you mentioned before, when you realize that it's not that we're competing, it is that we're building a community. And so, the hope is that we are able to inspire one another, encourage one
Yeah,
another, and keep it going.
yeah.
So, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And for our Blackout readers, so just so that you all know a little bit of background of how we got here, is that Mr. Brandon Nick has a piece that'll be coming out in August.
Mm-hmm.
And ooh, we talked about that photography, hint, hint. But and so we just had the opportunity to have a little quick conversation about that, and I was like, dude, you have way too much in you to just be like a piece in the magazine. I was
Yeah.
like, the world needs to meet you.
Thank you.
So
I received that.
So, you mentioned, you alluded to, you talked about a little bit that docu-series that you're trying to get to, and
Yes.
that is part of what we will see in the magazine. And so, as we're kind of wrapping up, if you could just tell us a little bit about that project, where you're hoping that people will be able to see it, if you have some ideas, or if that's still in the works, that's fine as well.
Yeah.
But I know that that's something very close to your heart. You're very passionate about. So could you just kind of tell us a little bit of background, a little bit of information about that?
Yes. So the where do I begin? I did a short film called Miss Honey the Catsuit, and it is about the Jamaican music artist Wa Renee, most famously known for the song "Don't You Hear Me Calling You Miss Honey." And in the short documentary, I interview amazingly talented Black queer elder named Douglas Says. He's a fashion designer. He's the one who made the infamous infamous is the wrong word. The one who made the famous, notable, and copied cutout catsuit that Wa Renee wore for the televised performance of the Miss Honey song. And what is really nice about having made that project was it had also helped me reconnect like my own Caribbean roots. Homophobia. Well, maybe y'all don't know, but like homophobia had disrupted my connection to my Trinity background. Families have their thing. Caribbeans have their things with gays. But in making this project, I was actually able to not only reconnect with like my culture, but also reconnect with many parts of like my Caribbean family. Some of which are queer. So I think that has also been nice. But knowing and taking a step back, in the years leading up to finishing Miss Honey the Catsuit, which originally started as a episode for a podcast I had called Let's Get Back to Queer. I'd met so many folks, so many elders, and so many Black queer and trans folks who were just like, oh my gosh, I remember Wa Renee from the club, like baby, he was turning Midtown, I forgot the name of the club, Midtown 43, Midtown something, he was turning the clubs up, baby. And so I made the short, but then I was just like, it really feels like a disservice, one, to Wa Renee as a person, but also to all of these people, to not tell the story further, because I think, and I imagine the missus, that this is something that you can also recognize, or this is my belief, that like, the folks who came before us, they were so their priority was survival, not necessarily archival. So a lot of things were made not with the intention of like actually being preserved. So we, we don't have the most robust Black queer archive, and I think that
Mhm.
is actually a very much of a huge disservice to us as a people. And so much of the work that I have been doing over these past few years is like how do I preserve our culture and our legacies. And so I was like, yes, it is a disservice to only stop Why Renee's story here. So I'm going to talk to all these people that I've met, and I'm going to do a docu series now. And so at some point, it will, I think, live on YouTube or Vimeo. I do believe that this will be a something that I get to give to the community, because one, Why Renee deserves to be known for more than that green wig and this outfit and that little sway dance. But it also does hold space for a lot of other people. Again, because I did this documentary, I also am able to tell Douglas's story, which I will get more into in this August issue, right? Um, and so yeah, so I'm really excited to. I'm really excited about the Douglas piece. I'm also very much excited to finish the Why Renee docu series. I mean, it's still tentatively called Miss Honey, but by the time I make announcements, the project may change.
Yes.
Which I think is also just like a beautiful journey of process, and to see how something became this thing and then morphed into this thing and then morphed into that thing. Um,
Yes,
yeah.
that's beautiful. That is fantastic. And I love it. I love that you with an open heart really are just sharing with the community and digging deep in yourself
Mm.
to bring that out and that creative and encouraging the rest of us to live out loud.
Baby, okay. That
Okay.
that is the goal. If there is a gay agenda, Brandon's is for us to live our most authentic, pleasurable lives, because we are here on this floating rock in the middle of nothing for a very finite amount of time. So as best as I can, it's like I want to give folks things that give them permission, or like the introspection to be like, where's my pleasure at? How can I tap more into that and be free?
Yes. Oh my goodness gracious. Yes. Let me tap into that and be free. I
Mm.
absolutely love that. And I think that is a perfect finish. So,
Yes.
just a little bit, tell the people where they can find you, where they can watch the journey, where can they pick you up. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Brandon Nick. It is BRAND0NNICK. I also have a Patreon if folks would like to follow the journey on a more intimate level, where I post behind the scenes and in the process works, which can also be found via Brandon Nick on all the socials. My website is www.brandonnick.com. And I'm outside. If you see me in the streets of New York City or Jersey City, say hello. If my face doesn't seem friendly, it's probably just because I'm annoyed, or I'm outside. But I'm a kind-hearted person. I will talk your ear off if you tell me hello.
I
So look, catch me
love it.
outside.
Yes, catch me outside, honey. There is a song, I don't know how much you follow sort of like country, southern music, but there is a song, Auntie Outside. And so, honey,
Okay.
let me tell you something. You got to go look it up. Auntie
Auntie
Outside.
outside. Auntie
Auntie
outside. I'm finna look that
outside,
up
honey. She done
now.
dropped those kids off. Auntie is outside. Okay. Um,
Yes.
So it has been such a pleasure, such a wonderful time to be able to sit down with you.
Thank
I
you.
mean, to be honest, we could just talk
Right.
and talk and talk some more because there is so much. And like I said, packing in those layers, and you are a beautiful
Thank
representation
you.
of what happens when you are willing to share those layers with the
Mm,
world.
thank
So,
you.
thank you so much for joining me today. Blackout audience, oh my goodness gracious. I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Don't forget that like and subscribe. Go follow Brandon. Make sure that you're paying attention to what's happening in Blackout. And you better get that August issue because Brandon has the conversation is continuing, honey. And so
Yes.
we want to continue to watch the journey. So, for all of you who have sat down and enjoyed this moment with us, I hope that you are being your most authentic self, like Brandon told
Mm-hmm.
us. Okay, go out there, live out loud, and be fabulous. All
Yes.
right, now until next time, guys, I'm Ronnie Winston, aka the Mrs., aka Auntie Ronnie, and hey, Auntie about to be outside. Until
Ah.
next time.
I know that is right.